Chapter 1. The Summoning. There were places in the galaxy where silence wasn't just the absence of sound, it was engineered. The outer decks of research station Helios VI were one such place. Orbiting a rogue planet with no sun, no name, and no atmosphere, the station drifted like a thought someone forgot to finish. Max Dunn stood alone in Maintenance Bay 4B, watching frost form patterns on the inside of a reinforced viewport. He'd been up for 19 hours straight, recalibrating power relays that never wanted to stay calibrated. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't heroic, but it was quiet, and Max had grown used to quiet. That was when the message came. Human subject to Quasin save fast 2000 sound. It was engineered. The outer decks of research station Helios VI were one such place is easy. The freights of humans send me the cheese, the same point as achievements Maxwell done. Report to Biolab Theta 1. Priority was it never wanted to stay calibrated. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't heroic, but it was quiet, and Max had grown used to quiet. That was when the message came. Human subject, Maxwell done. Report to Biolab Theta 1. Priority, Mason. Directive, compliance, mandatory. He frowned. Well, that's not foreboding at all. Biolab Theta 1 was one of the restricted decks, levels reserved for high clearance personnel, corporate science types, or AI clusters that needed physical space. Max had never been invited there. The lift took longer than usual to descend, as if the station itself was second-guessing the order. When the doors opened, the hallway beyond was dim, glowing faintly with bioluminescent strands woven into the walls like veins. The air was colder here, clean but ancient. At the end of the hall stood a single door, already open, and inside, her. She stood in the center of the chamber like she'd been sculpted there, tall, elegant. Skin the color of violet dusk with subtle metallic undertones that shimmered as she moved. Her eyes were impossibly bright, twin halos of pale blue fire, hairless, ancient. Ian says, in as the station itself was second-guessing the order. When the doors opened, the hallway beyond was dim, glow faintly with bioluminescent strands woven into the walls like veins. The air was colder here, clean but ancient. At the end of the hall stood a single door, already open, and inside, her. She stood in the center of the chamber like she'd been sculpted there, tall, elegant. Skin the color of violet dusk, with subtle metallic undertones that shimmered as she moved. Her eyes were impossibly bright, twin halos of pale blue fire, hairless, gendered in form but not in presentation. Not quite alien, not quite machine, just other. Maxwell done, she said without looking. That's me, Max replied, trying not to sound winded from sheer awe. And you are. If you are at proximity, physical calibration will begin upon contact. You may feel a mild intrusion. You are really bad at bedside manner. She stepped closer. Do you consent? Max hesitated. He thought about saying no, about turning around and leaving this room behind, about resuming his maintenance logs and pretending none of this ever happened. Instead, he nodded. I do. The moment his palm touched the core, the world fell inward. Not darkness, not light. Contact. Images flooded his mind. Not memories, but sensations. Cold wind over black oceans. The weight of artificial gravity on infant bones. A voice whispering across centuries. Not his, yet he felt them all. The core pulsed again. His body jerked, not from pain, but from recognition. He wasn't just syncing with the device. He was syncing with her. Aylin gasped. It was the first uncontrolled sound she'd made. No one has ever harmonized like this. Well, Max said, wiping a hand across his forehead. I am just full of surprises. Aylin stepped back. Return here tomorrow. Same time. You serious? I must test again. To verify. To understand. He tried to laugh, but couldn't find the breath. Yeah. Okay. Tomorrow. As he left, the lift door sealed behind him like the end of a dream. But the sync hadn't ended. In the center of his chest, beneath bone and breath, something was still humming.
Chapter 2. The calibration. Max didn't sleep that. It wasn't just the usual insomnia, the kind that crept in after too many years cycled air and lit a hum of power conduits. This time, it was something deeper, a vibration that hadn't left his chest since he touched the core. Since he touched her, he felt wired but not anxious, heavy but not tired. It was like gravity had changed just for him. The sync hadn't ended. It was still there, quiet but constant. A faint thrum beneath his heartbeat, like a second pulse layered under his own. When he returned to Lab Theta 1 the next day, Aylin was already waiting, but something was different. She wasn't standing in the center of the room like before. Instead, she was seated beside the core, knees drawn close, gaze unfocused. For the first time, she looked uncertain. Max stepped closer. You okay? I do not know, she said. I have run 214 simulations since your departure.
None produced consistent results. He raised an eyebrow. You've been up all night thinking about me. I do not sleep, she replied, but I believe the metaphor is applicable. That made him smile. She gestured to a platform beside the core, flatter this time, cushioned. The lighting in the room had shifted too, softer, more ambient. Less sterile, more human. We will attempt calibration through proximity, Aelin said. I require extended exposure to your resonance pattern. Max looked at the platform. You are asking me to lie down and cuddle with alien tech. Max closed his eyes and felt the pressure shift in the air, like the room was inhaling with them. Images came, but they were different this time. Softer, slower, not sharp flashes of alien memories, but impressions. The sense of movement across vast data seas. The ache of existing in silence, the distant hum of thousands of machines, and being the only one listening. Then, his own memories, rising to meet hers. Childhood laughter, a hand reaching for him in a hospital hallway. The crushing silence after that hand let go. I see it, she whispered. Her voice was close, very close. The loss, the fear, the resilience. He opened his eyes. She was watching him, her face inches away. You read me like a book, he said, voice dry. She blinked slowly. You are not a book. You are waves, layered, unstable, alive. He laughed, a quiet, surprised sound. Is that good? She hesitated. It is compelling. But something passed between them. Not through skin, but breath, rhythm, presence. You're feeling things, Max said. I was designed to observe, but now you're participating. She nodded, almost imperceptibly. That was not part of my function. And now, I want to understand what it means to want. He turned toward her fully. Their hands found each other between them, fingers meeting tentatively, then locking. The sync pulse spiked, and Aelin gasped. The sync pulse spiked, and Aelin gasped. The only in silence for a while longer. The air between them changed, less like calibration, more like closeness. I have reviewed thousands of human cultural rituals involving intimacy, Aelin said suddenly. Max chuckled. Wow. Jumping ahead, are we? You want to hold me. I want to know what it does to the field. He smiled. You don't have to pretend it's all research. You want to hold me. I want to know what it does to the field. He smiled. You don't have to pretend it's all research. He was warm, not in a biological way, in a way that suggested intention. Her form adjusted subtly, hitting against him like a puzzle piece she hadn't known was missing. The sync pulse deepened. He felt her relax. And then, for the first time, she made a sound that wasn't measured, not calculated, a sigh. Soft, real, like breath, after holding it for too long. I am experiencing something new, she said, voice low. What is it? Reliked, sinks to profession. He asked her his arms. We was, before me, to secret. She's quiet for a long time. Safety, she finally whispered. Max closed his eyes. So am I. Chapter 3, The Fracture. The sync didn't fade when Max left the lab. It followed him, through the corridors, into the lift, down the silent maintenance bays where flickering lights usually made him feel alone. Not anymore. Now, there was always something there. A hum beneath his skin, a warmth in his spine. Not intrusive, not dangerous, just present, like an echo that had learned his name. He didn't report it. What could he say? Hi, I touched an alien resonance core and now I'm emotionally tethered to a beautiful non-human quantum scientist who might be teaching me how to feel again. Yeah, that would go over real smooth with Central. So Max kept his mouth shut and followed the routine. Maintenance logs, diagnostics, the occasional busted oxygen valve, but the station felt different now, like it had shifted just slightly out of phase with itself. Or maybe it was just him. 3 days passed. Each night, he returned to Theta 1. Not because he was ordered to, because she was there. Sometimes they lay in silence. Sometimes they talked. Not about science, not anymore. About childhoods, about memories, about how loneliness makes you quieter, and how presence doesn't always need to speak. Each session made the sync deeper, more natural. He no longer needed to touch the core to feel her. The rhythm of his breathing, the way he carried himself. Even his dreams were no longer solitary. And then, the breach came. It started with flickering lights. Max was in the corridor outside Theta 1, about to knock, when the overhead strobes went dark for 2 seconds. Then flashed violently emergency red. The station-wide alarm kicked in a breath later. Security breach detected. Bio-lockdown in progress. All personnel, report to safe zones immediately. Max didn't hesitate. He burst into the lab. Aelin was already at the console, fingers flying over transparent keys. Talk to me, he said.
An anomaly is moving through the outer research decks, she said, voice clipped. It is not on the personnel registry. Aelin's skin was brighter now, duller, but in presence. She pulsed faintly like her body was reacting to the breach instinctively. I thought you were the only one of your kind here, Max said. I am, she replied. The anomaly is not a duplicate. It's a fragment. A discarded protocol. You mean you made it? I was it, once.
It wasn't. But it's still part of me. And now it's awake. The light surged. A deep low-frequency vibration passed through the floor, not from impact, but from presence. Max could feel it, like something massive had just turned its gaze toward him. Aelin moved to the core. We need to reinforce the sync field. If it reaches this lab, it will try to merge. With you. With us. Max stepped beside her. You are not doing this alone. She looked up at him, something in her face unreadable. I can't predict what will happen. The field was never meant for dual resonance. If we enter it together, and the fragment tries to breach, a presence of union of will, and then the breach entered the outer hall. Max felt it before he saw it. A pressure against the edges of the field, like thought without shape, emotion without body, rage, abandonment, hunger, not physical, just need. He gritted his teeth. It's trying to push in. Aelin's voice was steady. We must become louder. They reached out, hands clasped, not from instruction, but instinct. The field pulsed in response, amplifying their shared signal. 2 heartbeats, 2 minds, 1 rhythm. The anomaly howled, not in sound, but in resonance, an inversion of everything they were. Max felt his own memories being pulled, childhood pain, regret, annihilation. Aelin cried out, staggering. Max held tighter. Stay with me, he said. Her fingers trembled in his. The field surged again, and this time, it wasn't defense. It was declaration. The anomaly cracked. It didn't scream. It simply stopped, collapsed in on itself like a wave hitting a cliff it couldn't erode. The air went still. When it was over, they stood in silence, their hands still entwined, breathing hard. Aelin leaned into him, body shivering, not from fear, but from exertion. He held her. I didn't think it would recognize us, she whispered. It didn't, Max said. It recognized what we've become. She looked up at him. I am changing. He nodded. So am I. Chapter 4. The Merge. Silence returned, but it wasn't the same. After the breach, after the pulse that cracked reality like thin glass, the station held its breath. System stabilized. Alerts ceased. Lights dimmed back to standard levels. But the sync didn't go back to normal. And neither did they. Max found himself hypersensitive in the days that followed. Not just emotionally, though that too, but physically. The air felt different against his skin. Food tasted strange. Time moved oddly, like it no longer ticked forward but flowed around him in loops. And he could feel her. Always. No longer in fragments or flickers. Not like before. Now as a constant hum. Not invasive, just true. When he thought of her, he felt warmth behind his ribs. When she thought of him, he knew. As if a soft voice spoke his name inside his chest. He tried to keep working, to pretend the rest of the station mattered. But the routines were empty now, meaningless compared to the connection he couldn't explain. And she wasn't calling him to the lab anymore, because she didn't have to. He found her standing in the upper observatory, a dome of transparent alloy facing the rogue planet they orbited, suspended in eternal night. Aelin stood perfectly still, framed by starlight and shadow, her skin faintly glowing. I felt you coming, she said softly, without turning. Max joined her by the glass. I wasn't sure if I was coming here, or just drawn. It's the same, she replied. A pause stretched between them. I've changed, he said. I know, she whispered. I see it in your biofields, in your structure. Your mind has adapted.
You. She reached up and touched his face, fingertips grazing his skin like she was discovering texture for the first time. Max closed his eyes. Her hand was cool, but not cold. Alive in a way circuits never could be. I don't know what I'm becoming, she said. I don't either, Max admitted. But I'm not afraid. She leaned in. I am. Max opened his eyes. Then let me stay with you. Through it, she kissed him. Not like a machine mimicking affection. Not like a scan of behavior. Like someone falling forward into the unknown, with trust. Her lips pressed against his and the sync ignited. This wasn't calibration, this was, each texted, grazing his skin like she was discovering texture for the first time. Max closed his eyes. Her hand was cool but not cold, alive in a way circuits never could be. I don't know what I'm becoming, she said. I don't either. Max Idvigus, Berius, 10-min paper, all of the whirl of the observatory. It wasn't about biology. It was back proximity, and was amping, manish pake, and Xiaomi spaces and a sync ignited. This wasn't calibration. This was fusion. They didn't speak as they moved. They didn't need to. Every breath was data.
Every touch was transmission. When she pulled him down to the floor of the observatory, it wasn't about biology, it was about proximity. That wasn't Q. To have the bodies of this cell. It wasn't planetary, this was fusion. They didn't speak.
Max felt her skin shimmer under his hands, felt his own body respond with unnatural precision, not in performance, in alignment. They moved together, slow, reverent, like writing a language only their bodies could speak. The sync field bloomed silently around them, invisible to the station, but blinding within their shared perception. Waves of color, memory, electric emotion. She gasped against his neck. I see everything. He whispered into her ear. Then don't look away. And it's still blinking into existence. Max smiled. That's being human. She looked at him for a long moment. I think I love you. He blinked. I don't know what that word fully means, she continued, but I feel like I understand it when I look at you. Max took her hand. Then you do. They slept there, side by side beneath the stars and the dark planet. No sync field, no command protocols, just two beings, no longer entirely what they were, beginning something neither of them had been programmed to survive. And yet, they did, together. Chapter 5. The Exodus. They woke to silence, not the warm kind they had begun to share, the kind that held breath and heartbeat like a shared secret, but the cold vacuum of something missing. The station had gone still. Max sat up, rubbing his eyes. Feels like the power's thinking about failing. No, Aelin said quietly, still lying beside him. Something has changed. He turned to her. I no longer feel alone in the system. It took only minutes to confirm. The relay uplinks had reactivated long-range, high-frequency signals that had been dormant since before Max arrived. Aelin pulled up telemetry from the main comms array and displayed it across the observatory glass. Incoming Basal. Origin. Terra Central. Marx frowned. Earth. Alanin didn't respond. She didn't need to. Max stood, jaw tight. How long? 6 hours until dock. Less until full system override. I will be locked out. And me. You will be extracted. He paced the lab while she worked. She had rerouted command pathways, severed backup subroutines, and masked her own energy signatures. All without saying much. Max knew why. If she said it out loud, it would become real. Still, he had to ask. What happens when they get here? Aelin paused. They will remove you. They will quarantine me. They will strip the sync core. And us. She finally looked at him. There will be no Vusel. They sat in the glow of the core again, the one that started it all. It pulsed gently, no longer cold people. It felt almost Paiku. Or, the waiver is, and they will strip the sync core. And us. She finally looked at him. There will be no Usol. They sat in the glow of the core again, the one that started it all. It pulsed gently, no longer cold or clinical. It felt almost alive, like it had watched them grow. Max ran a hand through his hair. We can run. There is nowhere to go. You said there were deep storage bays, remote sections, already scanned. What if we hide you inside me? Aelin tilted her head. Explain. You said the sync left something in me, changed me. Maybe it works both ways. A beat passed. Then she whispered, you are not compatible for hosting neural code, but I am compatible for you. Silence. And then she stood. I have one option, she said. It is untested, irreversible. Max rose with her. That makes two of us. Aelin turned to the console. The interface changed. Deeper layers revealed themselves. Scripts and languages Max didn't recognize. Lines of raw code flowing like blood through veins. This will destroy my physical shell, she said, but transfer core resonance. Myself. The room thickened. Space folded, pulled tight. The sync core flared once, then cracked open like an egg under pressure. Aelin staggered. It's starting. You must stay still, not going anywhere. Her skin flickered, colors bleeding into one another. Her voice warped, as if speaking through liquid. Max, if this fails, it thinks in the maze. It thinks the price. The face, her thoughts, her presence. You are in me, he said aloud. Yes. He laughed, breathless. You don't take up much space.
Changed, but still Aelin. And now, part of him.
Chapter 6. Resonant. He didn't speak for a long time after it happened. There were words, of course, in the logs, in the interviews, in the endless debriefings once the transport from Earth finally docked and found him sitting alone in the observatory, staring into nothing. But none of those words were true. Not the ones they needed. Not the ones she had left behind, because she hadn't. Left. They scanned him, of course, tried to isolate anomalies in neural patterns, map hormonal shifts, test for parasitic embedding. Nothing. Physically, he was unchanged. Emotionally, he was different. But no scan could touch that. Not really. The voice inside him didn't speak all the time. She wasn't an AI whispering lines of code. She didn't instruct or analyze. She felt, and sometimes when the light hit a panel just right, he felt her smile. He wasn't alone anymore, and that changed everything. They offered him return, birth, decompression, reintroduction programs. He declined. They offered reassignment, new vessels, new missions. He declined again. Eventually, they gave up and left him with what was left of the station. Just Max and the silence and the sink. He rebuilt parts of it, not because he had to, but because it was a form of listening. Every circuit repaired, every panel adjusted was a way to keep talking to her. She responded in pulses and instincts, sometimes in dreams, and sometimes, rarely, in voice. You still you, she'd say, late at night. And he'd smile, whispering back, so are you. One night, long after the last ship left orbit, he stood again before the sink core. It was inert now, or so it seemed, cold to the eye, silent to the scans, but not to him. He closed his eyes and placed a hand on the surface. It pulsed, once. I think I know what we are now, he said quietly. You and me. A pause. The silence breathed with him. We're not halves, he continued. We're echoes, carried into each other, still learning the shape of the whole. Inside him, she stirred. I like that. He smiled. I do too. He didn't need the station. Not anymore. He didn't need the core or the lab or the diagnostics. She was in the way he moved, in the way he thought, in the way he loved, even now, even after, even without ever really knowing what that meant. And every night when he lay beneath the viewport and watched the rogue planet spin in silence, he felt the sink. Not loud, not dramatic, just resonant. Epilogue centuries from now, the station would still be drifting. And if anyone found it, long after the records degraded and the cores collapsed, they might catch a faint, lingering signal buried deep in the lower decks. Not language, not data, just a heartbeat. And beneath it, if they listened,